Hi everyone. Today we'll be discussing Dr. Stu McGill's low back pain prevention, utilizing his protocol, the Big Three. And again, most of our conversation will revolve around some of Dr. McGill's teachings, but as usual, we will kind of go on some tangents and come back. So here we go. Here's a handful of books that I've gone through that all spent quite a bit of time discussing low back pain. And low back pain is a topic worth diving into because it's the number 2 reason that individuals in the United States visit the doctor's office, second only to the common cold. As you can see here, I've got a few of the Dr. McGill books, got a couple of Kelly Starrett books, and then I've got an older edition of the of something from Dr. Robin McKenzie. But going through, predominantly stick to some of the philosophies that come from Dr. McGill today, from the 3 books of his that you see there. But I also highly recommend Dr. Kelly Starrett. Just a little bit of data on back pain and collegiate athletes. So back pain is not just for your overweight, middle-aged, or elderly. Our college athletes, young and healthy and strong, are dealing with low back pain as well. I'm going to keep my mouth shut for a moment and just let you guys kind of read through that. So as you can see, low back pain is common. It's going to affect our athletes. And if we can do something about it, it's a space worth looking into. As far as our general population goes, we are, if you're looking for something to do that could, in this space, that can make you some money, getting good at helping people recover and even prevent low back pain is something worth looking into. Look at all just in the general population, look at all the work that's being missed annually. And with that would come quite a bit of a financial burden on the companies that employ these people. If we can help our athletes prevent low back pain, they get to pursue their dreams and their sport. If we can help our general population prevent low back pain, they can, be going to work and lead happier lives and things like that. Back pain tends to be a greater issue in the Western civilizations. So United States, obviously, but a lot of the industrialized companies that have been through the Industrial Revolution and are now more of where the masses sort of spend their work days at the computer. Ironically, it's the time spent sitting. If you were to read one of the books I listed earlier, was Kelly Starrett's Desk Bound. Ironically, the more time we spend sitting at a desk, the more low back pain we tend to have. It's that working in a field and that manual labor that might actually activate your core enough to cause you to hold it into a proper position to prevent some of that low back pain. And it's my philosophy, which I've borrowed and stolen from others, is that our core is not designed to create force. Our core is there to transfer force. So a lot of the core work that we'll look at today is going to be a little bit more stability based versus movement based. And that is going to help us not only in sports, but in day-to-day life. And also if we are hurting, it's going to help us reduce that pain and get back into a state of comfort versus discomfort. So when we are looking at exercises, not only today, But outside of what we're going to cover today, I would encourage you all to be thinking a little bit more along the lines of core stability exercises versus core movement exercises that involve rotation. So I would encourage you to think more about anti-rotation and anti-flexion versus rotation or flexion exercises. That's going to be better for our spines. And it's also going to be more applicable for sports. In sport, it's often the legs and hips that are digging into the earth and contracting, and that force is just transferred up through the spine of the arms. Versus maybe an athlete who does quite a few sit-ups, that movement of the sit-up is just not going to be utilized very often in traditional sports. So not only is it going to be counterintuitive because of the low back pain that it's proven to be associated with. Dr. Stu McGill does research on these things about what happens to the stresses on the spine during crunches and sit-ups. But so not only is it it's harmful just in regards to pain, but also it's not really even worth the training of it in that fashion if it's not going to apply in sport or in day-to-day living. So something to think about. We may need to rethink our approach to core work. Doesn't mean you can't ever do crunches or a sit-up here and there. Just means that that's not optimal. That's not going to be the most conducive with a happy, healthy, and strong core. Who is this Dr. Stu McGill that I keep talking about? He's a research professor at the University of Waterloo. I've included a link to his website and a handful of books that he's written, one of which was co-authored with a very successful powerlifter by the name of Brian Carroll. And here is that powerlifter who co-wrote a book, Gift of Injury, with Dr. McGill. And I threw some of his numbers on there just to kind of show that he is a very successful lifter. And some of his best numbers ever achieved were achieved after seeking out help from Dr. Stu McGill because of a chronic low back pain issue. So now I will warn you guys that Dr. McGill's approach and his teachings that I'm going to be sharing today are a little bit more for getting individuals out of pain, but they're good to keep in there for a regular basis, just as like a foundation for core stability and core health. But there's ways to progress them. And so utilizing this is a little bit more about not necessarily creating a top powerlifter in the world, strength for your core, or a core that's going to get you on the front of magazines, or a core that's going to help you hit home runs. What we're covering today is a little bit more about reducing, eliminating, and preventing low back pain. But again, if it works for someone who goes on to become a world record setting lifter, maybe it can help you and I and our athletes and our clients. And one of the things that I really took away from Dr. McGill is to always be conscious. So ABC, always be conscious. And some of those small back issues that can kind of linger or get worse, a lot of times they get irritated just in our day-to-day living, not so much running for a game-winning touchdown or making a big play or doing anything heroic. Sometimes we're just sort of bending over to pick up a towel after we get out of the shower. In fact, through doing my research on this, I sort of started thinking about just stories that people have told me over the years. Some of the biggest, strongest, healthiest athletes that I've talked to who have had issues with their low backs have talked about, really feeling their low back or it getting worse after they get out of the shower. And my thought is that maybe going into the shower, they're really relaxing, and the tension in the muscles and the muscle tone is kind of disappearing, and they're relaxing. And so the spine is not being protected by the muscles around it. And that's why after maybe they work out and then they have a shower, after that shower, the muscles are just tired and they're relaxed. And it's a good time to make something worse in and around the spine. So think about that example. So definitely protect your backs, in those periods of relaxation, such as after a shower. But also, we just want to be protecting our spine all day long. So, going to tie our shoes in the morning, going to pick up groceries, cleaning up after kids in the evening after they've gone to bed. That's a big idea that I took away from Dr. McGill, is to just always be conscious. It's not just when we have heavy loads on our backs, or we're running fast sprints, or we're doing whatever calisthenics. Or, sometimes it's just that daily living, picking up a pencil off the ground and you move poorly. So to just be moving properly with a stabilized spine 24/7. All right, let's take a little look at some of our key player muscles here. Pardon me. Okay. Multifidus, that's one Dr. McGill will refer to often. It's just associated with, it's just adjacent to our spine and interacts there. He'll mention the quadratus lumborum. These are just stabilizing muscles on and near the spine. Your erector spinae complex, all those muscles there. Again, just all these little muscles along the spine. Also want to be conscious of our glute med and max. Excuse me, minimus, glute med and minimus. But as we've talked about before, that glute, all of our glutes are going to be important. On our front side, being aware of our transverse abdominal. Let's see, rectus sheath, rectus abdominis, that's the one I was looking for, and it was around there somewhere. Our obliques are also going to play a role. Oh, here it is. I was looking for those obliques. I knew they were on here. Okay, those obliques are also going to play a role stabilizing. And what Dr. McGill really refers to, all the musculature around the spine, he kind of likens them to guy wires. So let me clear this mess up. Yeah, guy wires. So when you're driving by a big old telephone pole or a antenna or anything like that, it has all of those support lines down to the ground. Those are, as referred to by Dr. McGill, those would be called guy wires. And so again, take that visualization and go back to our anatomy chart. Is that it's not just one muscle linked into one side. It's having those muscles act like guy wires and stabilize all the way around the spine. And pardon me while I read here. The spine cannot bear load without a robust guy wire system. Your job is to create the entire guy wire system that will stabilize the column and facilitate robust and pain-free movement. Unilateral carrying creates frontal plane stability and essential strength with unique muscle pairings. Dr. McGill is a very big proponent of unilateral carries, as you can see from this image. And again, he harps on that multifidus muscle in our lower back and believes that this unilateral carry is going to be beneficial for training that multifidus. Okay, so here we go. Here's our big three. Top image is a side plank. Our middle image is the bird dog. Our bottom image is the curl up. And I will be demonstrating these at the end of the video with small tweaks to actually each of those images. So having read Dr. McGill's most recent book, The Gift of Injury, he has made tweaks to those. And so I'll be sharing his latest variations. With training, so again, let's say we have a injured or athlete in pain, and we are utilizing these big three exercises. Well, how are we going to use them? Dr. McGill is a proponent of the Russian descending pyramids. So I needed an image for this. I threw in Russian pyramids and I found something. So if you want to do a little National Geographic research on your own, check them out. They're pretty interesting. So his recommendation for an athlete who is not necessarily in pain, but just well enough to perform these exercises and need some extra stability in their lower back would be to do 3 sets. Each rep is going to be 10 to 15 seconds. First round is 6 holds or reps with a few seconds in between each rep, then rest about 10 to 20 seconds for set 2. Again, you're doing 3 sets of that. And then your second round, instead of 6 holds or reps, you're doing 4. And then your third round, you're going to do 2. So it's building that volume up. And he believes that by the time you can get to this prescription or suggestion of a volume of training, if you can complete that successfully without really pain, now you might have some fatigue, but not necessarily pain. If you can get to that point, then it may be time to progress away from the exercises, the big 3. So he is all for, I was surprised to see, just as I went through my research, I was surprised to see that he is such a proponent or an advocate of getting people away from these movements. These movements are for rebuilding a foundation, but once your foundation is built and your core is strong and you're moving pain-free and you're moving well, he wants you to progress it. He wants you to go above and beyond. But today we're just talking about creating that foundation, utilizing the big 3 to stop, prevent, and help individuals with low back pain. Another thing that Dr. McGill advocates is a walking routine. So when he helped our powerlifter, Brian Carroll, recover and heal and go on to set world records, some of his advice was to input 3 15-minute fast-paced walks per day. And again, excuse me while I read, but I just want to make sure that this information gets across. Our long entry at the bottom there. Walking is the best tool we have in the essential early training of the muscles in the frontal plane. In other words, this simple movement engages and exercises the core muscles required to counterbalance a recovering back and takes some of the load off the body's rear muscles. A brisk walk activates the quadratus lumborum and abdominal oblique muscles, which are essential structural supports. Pained individuals tend to carry an unnatural tension in their shoulders, particularly in the bulky strength athlete. Laxity is required in the shoulder to reduce spine load while walking, which is why we encourage a jaunty arm swing to loosen those shoulder muscles at your stride. This movement also enhances the storage and recovery of elastic energy in the muscles that crisscross in an interlacing pattern across the back, further reducing the load of the spine. So he makes a great case for taking fast-paced walks. And not only is it relaxing certain muscles, but it's also activating other muscles. And if you think back to our guy wire system example, is that some of those muscles, maybe some of those guy wires are too relaxed and some are too tight. And this fast-paced walking helps even out and make the tension of those muscles appropriate. So on top of doing our exercises that we'll go through today, keep in mind maybe inputting three brisk 15-minute walks per day with jaunty arm swings. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I will just quickly mention that low back pain is an umbrella term that can have to do with the nervous system, that can have to do with muscles. In the case of Brian Carroll, our powerlifter that we've referred to multiple times today, it was actually a broken bone. So his spine was not healing from a slip in the grass he had running an obstacle course as a police officer or maybe a firefighter, I forget. But essentially what they did, and just want to bring this up, is that they would challenge his low back with a little bit of lifting, and then they would give it a handful of days to adapt to the lifts that they had given it, and then they would bring in another lift. But what they were doing daily were the big three exercises and the walks. Okay, I won't read this one out loud, but I'm going to give you guys a moment to read through it. So essentially, this goes back to that philosophy that I was mentioning earlier. I'm not saying that I pulled my philosophy out of thin air, but I am saying that from multiple sources, too many to count. But that's sort of the destination that I've arrived at and settled on, is that our core is there to stabilize and allow everything else around it to move and create force. And that the core is there to just basically stabilize and act as basically just our base of operations for mobile shoulders and mobile hips to work from and articulate from. Bracing. This is Dr. Stu McGill's advice for teaching bracing. Bracing that would be done during heavy lifts, bracing that would be done during fast-paced runs, bracing that could be done sort of throughout the day if you're working at a standing desk. You could utilize these principles as well. And I will demonstrate some of this bracing at the end of this video. Quadruped rock, another movement that I'm going to demonstrate at the end. I have used this on myself, and it's extremely accurate for me. I've used it on a couple dozen athletes, and I've had great success there. This is not something that I don't have years of using this under my belt, but having learned about it a little while back and working with athletes, if somebody's playing around with their squat pattern or having some issues, I'll throw them down and I'll do this movement, and it seems to be working pretty well. Again, I'm still kind of new to it, but for me, it works extremely well, and I've had nothing but success with it so far. So I don't want to pretend I have more experience than that, but so far so good. I would encourage you guys to consider utilizing it to help identify proper squat patterns and positioning. It's based on your anatomical build in your acetabulum, where your femoral head goes up into your hip and your pelvis, excuse me. Some assessments. I'll go over these again. I just wanted you guys to have this information in front of you. The standing core control, looking at the individual, how much do they compensate when they move? How well do they move? Their torsion control, I'll do a demo of that later. Core endurance is basically just looking to see a plank. So front plank and your side planks. And Dr. McGill refers to some of the hockey teams up in Canada and says that they're using these for minimums, that 2-minute minimum in each position. Now, your ability to hold it for less than 1 minute marks a great risk in injury. And then not written here is that once you get over 3 minutes, there's really not much more benefit. So I now use this as a assessment with my teams as I put them into a plank position and I see who can hold it for 2 minutes. If they can't, then I give them extra homework and I talk about the risks of being that weak to your body weight ratio. And the research says that it's not core strength. So doing maybe a core based movement with a heavy load, but it's core stamina, such as a 2 to 3 minute plank hold, and that will help prevent low back injury. Which makes sense because think back to our ABCs, always be conscious. If you've got better stamina, then you got a better chance at staying in proper position throughout maybe the whole soccer game or the whole volleyball game or whatever. So there's really something to be said for that stamina and for that core endurance. And for me, now we're not done yet, but for me, these are some of the big things that I personally took away from Dr. McGill's teachings. I sort of did it with the Cobra stretch. You know, it's a sort of a fan favorite. I know I feel great when I do it. My athletes feel great when I do it. But it was sort of like as a short-term benefit. You know, you might get a pop or two and you feel good, but really what you're doing is you're decreasing the stability of your spine. Another thing I took away, number 2, was to progress the big 3. That McGill wants us to utilize the big 3 to create our foundation, but then once we're healthy and we're happy and our low backs are good, he wants us to push the envelope. He wants us to do harder things. Number 3 was that I altered my testing measures and I included some of the items that McGill has to share, such as a 2-minute plank hold. Number 4, walk more. Just a normal walk, brisk walk. Number 5, more reinforcement for standing desks. Again, I really enjoy the teachings of Dr. Kelly Starrett, and his book Desk Bound is very pro standing desks. And then Dr. McGill had some good reasons to use them as well. And then number 6, I started experimenting with that quadruped rock for squat depth and positioning. So after several years of trying to get athletes into a certain perfect squat position, I can now step away from the squat bar and have so instead of saying, something along the lines of, put more weight on the bar and you'll get lower into the hole, which is not really something I tell athletes to do, but it's something that often the athletes will tell me is that there's not enough weight on the bar. I can't get into that low position. But now we can step away from the bar, which can sometimes be a little dangerous and a little risky. And we can just put them on all fours on the ground and play around with their body positions, because some people don't have that acetabular or that femur to pelvis position that is conducive with a nice deep squat. Not everybody's built for that. Okay. I'm not going to run my mouth about all of these right now. You guys have them here. You can come back to it. But we are just going to go ahead and step into our demonstration period now. So I'll give you a second here to kind of have a look, but you might need to rewind to this portion and refer to it. Great. Let's go do some demos. Okay, I'm going to knock out some demos here. try to cover all the ones that I promised earlier in the presentation. If I missed something, please let me know. I was just talking about the quadruped rock and your squat position a little bit, so I'll kind of start there. And I'm not really going to face camera too much, but I will say that you can play. What you can do is you can play around your knee width and your foot width. So once you're in this quadruped rock position, again, I might move my knees in and out, and I can also move my feet in and out to help mimic a squat pattern. So for me, I'll start with my knees a little bit wider than my, basically my hip flexors or my ASIS, you know, your pelvis out front. So I'm gonna start with putting them just outside of that. And from there, I try to like picture that my feet are right underneath my knees. And for me, I've even got a pretty good little line in my shorts there, so you can see more or less where my femur would be. And so think here, you're basically at the top of a squat. And then this is sort of mimicking where you might come down lower. So I'm fortunate. I have decent luck with squatting to depth, and basically I can get my hamstring to my calf and feel pretty good about it. Now, if I start moving my hips around a little bit, or my knees a little bit. So if I bring my knees, instead of having my knee just outside of my ASIS or my sort of my hip flexor, if I bring it all in line, and I line my feet up underneath those, I'm going to tighten up a little bit earlier. It'd be more of a shallow squat for me, which is true of when I'm standing vertical with a bar on my back. So for me, it works fairly well. And it's not like a real obvious, like when I'm rocking back, it's not like my hips lock up and it hurts or anything like that. I can just feel the difference between the ease of movement and not. So it kind of takes listening to your body and knowing a little bit about how everything feels. But that is your quadruped rock. So if you ever have anybody who's really struggling to get down in position, that might be something to say, okay, quit stressing. You start giving them like 100 coaching cues while they're squatting. You might say, hey, let's leave the bar. Let's come over here. Let's play around with your knee and your foot position. And let's just see how things feel. And then going through this, you might build up their confidence a little bit. And you might say, okay, that felt pretty good. Well, let's go try and do that with maybe a little bit lighter load on your back. So you can play around with it like that. Or you might find that they get really gummed up. And you might say, hey, let's switch over to a single leg squat, or let's squat, but let's not go so deep. So now if you're a power lifter, you have to hit a certain squat depth. But if you're a hockey player, maybe you just want to get stronger to go play hockey. So some of us really enjoy squatting in depth and sort of hold it as a standard. But if at the end of the day, if your individual just needs to go pursue their dreams, and their dream is to play hockey, and they're not necessarily worried about a 500-pound squat, maybe we don't need to have them squatting to competition level depth. Just a thought. Okay, let's talk about the abdominal brace as McGILL sort of teaches it. And what I'm going to do is actually, I'll take this kind of weird kneeling position just so I can stay in frame here. Don't mind if I do. So same things I would do if I was standing up. So belly button's here. I want to get outside of that rectus abdominis. So my abs, I don't know if you can see them. Nope. I had just kind of like Sasquatch, like see him sometimes, you're not sure if you saw him, but you know, the legend says that they're there. Okay, so belly button's here, just coming outside of like your six-pack area, your rectus abdominis. And this is in a relaxed position, standing tall, kneeling tall in this case. And when I brace, watch my fingers. When I brace, my fingers actually go outward because what I'm doing is I'm cinching downward. As I'm flexing my rectus abdominis and the muscles around it, I'm creating a more stable base, a wider base, and a shorter spine is going to be a more stable spine. So that'd be part of it, is teach. And if you walk up to an athlete, you tell them to put their fingers there, and then you sort of show them that gives them a better idea. Okay, when the bar's on my back, that's the position I need to take. You can also talk about, you know, bracing for a punch in the gut, but really, I really like this. It's simple, it's easy. You can put, you know, their fingers on your belly. You can put your fingers on their belly as long as you clear it with them ahead of time. And it's just easy. Now, another point, especially for deadlifts and Olympic lifts, but you can try to do this on squats and even bench press a little bit too, is that not only are we bracing through here, but if our arm is down, what we're going to do is we're going to tighten up our pec here and our lat back here, and we're going to screw that shoulder joint down and stabilize it as much as possible. So again, if I have an athlete and we've communicated about ahead of time, and we're kind of maybe having them touch me a little bit, and then I touch them, maybe they've done the stomach thing already. What I have them do is I have them put a finger on my pec here and a finger on my lat back here. And if I'm getting ready to deadlift or doing an Olympic lift, when they feel me cinch down here and they feel those muscles tighten up to pull my shoulder down into position, they have a better understanding of what I want them to do when I say brace your core. So I think that's a great takeaway, something to play around with. The Lewitt drill will help us identify pelvic positioning. So we all have natural curves in our spine, and in that lower back, we have a curve. If we hold our knees at 90 degrees and just relax the head back, if we rock back and forth and kind of slow, you can find your neutral position there. Okay. So what that does is that gives us an idea. Again, that's a reinforcement of proper squat pattern. So that's me. I would be squatting, you know, below depth. My hip joint would be below my knee. So it gives us an idea for our squat patterns, but it also gives us an idea of what's tight and what might have issues. What is your pelvis positioning? If you're feeling neutral here, your pelvis is probably off tilt. If you're feeling neutral up here, probably a little bit off. So I would say anywhere close to depth, you should not have to bring your knees way up to feel neutral. Now, for really mobile individuals, your knees might come pretty high up. So that's your Lewitt drill, is basically just another example of seeing where muscle tension is. Is your belly firing and tight, and you're in a position that looks like you're not at squat depth? So it's just another way of looking at it. So when you take that spine, you lay down on the ground, it allows things to relax. So they can, it exposes where our joints really are, as opposed to having compensatory patterns with muscles being overactive. Okay. Let's go through a few of those. Now, what we're going to do now is I'm going to go through a few of the McGILL Big Three. I'm going to go through the McGILL Big Three, and I'm going to do, if I've got a progression for you, I'm going to do one or two of those. Not going to get too crazy on them. And at the end, I'll do that assessment, torsion control assessment that we talked about. Okay. So the curl up. One leg long, one leg short, both legs relaxed on the ground. Again, my spine has natural curves to it. My hands go under my spine, my low back, not underneath my butt, like when you're doing leg lifts. Sometimes you put your hands on your butt to give you some like false stability. My hands are going in my low back. This doesn't help me with the exercise. Actually makes it a little bit harder, but what I'm doing is I'm preventing my spine from unnaturally flexing or extending. I'm helping maintain a neutral spine. Big breath in. I'm up. I'm gonna exhale. And actually what I'm also gonna do is I'm gonna flare my arms forward. And what that does is that stops me from intentionally or unintentionally kind of cheating on them and using them. So that's one thing I see that's a common mistake, that people are they're sitting on their elbows a little bit much. So, and they're up here for a while and they're like, okay, I don't really feel anything. Whereas if you lift these up, you hold them in the right position, it's not long before their belly's aching a little bit. So that'd be a common mistake. Another thing I see is people will sit up here and you're saying, no, I don't want you pushing on your hands. I don't want you doing a sit up. It's just a little curl up. All we're doing is we're basically tightening up our belly into our lower back. Our hands are going to get some pressure on. And then once you're there, think about the Russian descending pyramids. So you want to hold for 10 or 15 seconds and then switch to the other side. And you can do them with holds. You can do them with, I wouldn't really do them with reps. Dr. McGill's not a huge fan of high rep flexion or extension of the spine. So there's a little bit of flexion there, but again, our hands are preventing too much of that excessive flexion, expensive spine movement. So for those, I would recommend maybe doing some big breaths that really isolates your belly when you're already under tension, and then you're challenging it to perform the breathing pattern as well. So I really like just breathing patterns on the curl ups, or you can go up and you can go up and down with individual breaths, or you can just come up and hold for timelines. You can get creative. I have some athletes who claim that they feel it more when they elevate that front leg and playing around with it. You know, I haven't read or seen McGill talk about this variation, but playing around with it and looking at it, it's not altering my spine function or my spine position, excuse me. And I don't think he would, so I'm not sure how he feels about it, but I don't think he would say this negating what we're going after. Because when you lift that leg up, you do feel a little bit more right in the belly. So I'm not sure what Dr. McGill would say about it, but since it keeps the spine in a neutral position, I would give it a green light. So just kind of stole that one from some of my athletes who were going above and beyond what I wanted. Let's go with a dead bug. So kind of a continuation of that same abdominal isolation. It's a dead bug. So dead bugs, you have a big variety there of dead bugs, but let's just say they all start in the same base position. Shoulders off the ground, head off the ground, knees and ankles at 90 degrees, knees, hips, ankles at 90 degrees. And then zombie arms, hands reaching for the ceiling. A full dead bug, be breath in the belly, hold it. Arms go back, not touching the floor, shoulders not touching the floor. Exhaling that breath, exhaling that breath. Run out of air. Take a couple of recovery breaths. Okay, let's switch it up. Let's do a half dead bug. And more dead bug variations. You can do banded, you can do partner resisted. You can throw foam rolls in the middle to create extra tension. The list goes on. There's dead bugs. Let's throw in a stir the pot. So McGILL talks about the dead bug. He lists it in some of his writing. He also lists the stir the pot. The nice thing about the stir the pot is that it requires a little bit less teaching than the dead bug. There's lots of ways to screw up the dead bug, not a whole lot of ways to screw up the stir the pot. So getting into a plank position, send them one way, bring them back around. Send them one way, bring them back around. So again, starting with the curl up, and then from there, McGILL wants us to progress it. He wants us to make it harder. So kind of get creative and kind of think things through a little bit. All those other movements were stabilizing through the core, that if there is movement, it's coming outside of my shoulders or outside of my hips. Okay, let's go on to the side plank. So side plank, there are quite a few variations of it, and the variations even change within his books and within videos that he's put out in the span of a handful of years. Here's what his most recent material that I've seen suggests. He suggests a side plank where your feet are at 45 degrees. So not flat on the ground. So we're not stacked. We're not flat like that. We're actually at 45 degrees. And that's the position that he suggests. Again, think back to Russian descending pyramids. 10 to 15 seconds. And the first set is 6 rounds, second set is 4 rounds, third set is 2 rounds. Once you're done with that, he wants it. Dr. McGill suggests progressing. And I've got different ways for us to progress. I'll just kind of jump to my favorite one. So it's a rolling side plank. And this is from Dr. McGill. So I'm confident that he'd be into it. All right. So I'll start at that 45-degree position. Big breath into my belly. Hold that breath. Pivot, rotate. My feet go vertical. My chest goes horizontal. Little pause. Start to exhale. I exhale back into my original position. That's the rolling side plank. Handful reps on one side, handful reps on the other side. It gets tough. It's pretty tough. All right, the bird dog. I can't tell you guys how many years I've been having athletes and clients do bird dogs. With some of my recent research into McGill's teachings, I'm now doing them a little bit different. By the way, when I was in high school, my strength coach had me do these bird dogs my senior year. And I thought he was like losing it. And the next day I was sore. I like made a beeline in the weight room and I told him the next day that I was sore. And he laughed in my face, as you can imagine, as I like to think I would do today. Okay, bird dogs. Opposite limbs are going up. And what I used to coach until not too long ago, what I used to coach was for horizontal position. Horizontal position. So one thing that I would change, look at my spine right now. My spine is neutral. My spine is fairly straight. My spine is not horizontal. So if I go into a horizontal position, that's not conducive with a neutral spine. I'm out of alignment, I'm overextending, especially at the hip. So what I would suggest, if you guys were doing that like I was, the first thing I would suggest is dropping your foot. Okay, again, I've got that nice kind of seam on my shorts there. Now it's lining up with my spine a little bit more. So my foot's gonna be a little bit lower. Sometimes now I'll do reps and I'll just touch my foot. I'll just keep my toe on the ground. Actually, I'll kind of use, I don't know if you guys can hear my toe dragging. Well, I'll play around with that sometimes. So that's how I used to be. I try to go for that horizontal position. Now I drop the foot and I lift the hand a little bit more because now that's in line with where my spine naturally is. So there's a little tweak there. And again, Russian descending pyramids, you would bring it up and hold tight for 10 to 15 seconds for 6 rounds, then 4 rounds, then 2 rounds. Another variation or additional cue that McGill has gifted us recently is that front hand, make it into a fist. That's going to help activate the levator scapula a little bit more. Yeah, that fist out front, you feel the levator scapula, you feel your lower traps a little bit more. It's good, I feel the difference. It also kind of gives you some different things to do. Your athletes, instead of just like bobbing into like that position, now they know, okay, fist here, foot's low, in a straight alignment, all that good stuff. So I like that. If you're not doing a fist out front, I kind of like an open hand that's almost not quite palms up, but like kind of 45 degrees. As far as progressing the bird dog, you can always do like a longer holds, more reps, things like that. But McGill has a variation that I don't know. I just wouldn't think of it, but he loves it and he makes a great rationale for it. The way that it's going to challenge your core is that he suggests drawing a box. And he suggests putting your fist and your foot in opposite corners of the same box. So when my fist is, let's say, in the upper right corner, my foot would be in the bottom left corner. And then as I move through the movement, they're going to always kind of stay opposite each other. So I'll try that. I wouldn't say it's harder than it sounds. It's about as hard as it sounds. It's kind of like a coordination thing. So if you're struggling with that, I would say keep your foot and your fist in the same corner. Go upper left together, upper right together. If you get what I'm saying. So here's a demo. Not sure if you guys can kind of pick this up from here. Maybe a 45 degree angle will kind of work. So right now my fist is in the upper left corner, my foot's in the bottom right corner. And as I shift them around, yeah, you feel it. So you feel that in the glute. Again, we've already talked a little bit about what your glute med, minimus, maximus do. So when that leg starts drifting around in all those corners, the glute is firing up. And then as my arm is drifting around into different positions, I feel it along the inside of my scapula, in between my shoulder blade and my spine. I feel those muscles lighting pretty well. So that would be a bird dog progression. Yes, there's more. Again, yes, McGill wants us to master these fundamentals, have happy, healthy backs, and then progress from there. Okay, one more thing real quick. Here we go. We're gonna do the torsion control test. So again, the two other tests that McGill suggested was just basically as an individual stands and moves around, are they able to brace their core? Do they have mobile hips and shoulders that allow the limbs to do the articulating while the core can stay stable? And then the core endurance. So we've done planks, we've seen planks. 2-minute minimum for stamina, 3-minute maximum. Once they're doing 3 minutes, you don't really test them anymore. And then if they're only able to do a 1 minute on a plank hold, that shows that they have a heightened chance of injury. It's not core strength that prevents injuries, it's core stamina. Because you want to ABC, you want to always be conscious. You want to be able to hold that proper position 24/7. Torsion control is this is torsion control. So push-up plank position. Try to get my hands and feet shoulder width. Hand to elbow. Hand to elbow. Floating foot. Floating foot. And I'm not sure how I did there. I felt some baby shifts. I felt some muscles firing. I don't know if Dr. McGill would give me the pass or not, but I know I can improve there. I can feel that I can improve a little bit. But again, we had that slide today that I chose not to read. It's kind of an example of the fact that our core is even important on a bench press. You know, we want everything to be in here very tight. So when muscles fire, they're not busy backtracking and stabilizing centrally, is that they're able to exert their force distally. So the more stable we are from the inside out, the better function we're going to get out of our muscles and out of their movements. Okay, that's our lift for today.